Hey everyone, my name's Kate and I'm here at the Eastside Freedom Library in St. Paul, Minnesota. And this week I have two stories for you because they're a little bit longer than the ones that we sometimes read in the past. So if you are really little and you don't want to sit through a longer book, there are a lot of different old episodes of Stories for Little People that you can find on our YouTube channel or on Facebook on the Eastside Freedom Library's Facebook page. These are stories that are probably more appropriate for second, third, fourth, fifth graders. If that's something that's interesting to you, the first one is called Baseball Saved Us by Ken Machizuki. One day, my dad looked out at the endless desert and decided there to build a baseball field. He said we needed something to do in the camp. We weren't in a camp that was fun, like summer camp. Ours was in the middle of nowhere, and we were behind a barbed wire fence. Soldiers with guns made sure we stayed there, and the man in the tower saw everything we did, no matter where we were. As Dad began walking over the dry, cracked dirt, I asked him again why we were here. Because, he said, America is at war with Japan, and the government thinks Japanese Americans can't be trusted. But it's wrong that we're here. We're Americans too. He made a mark in the dirt and mumbled something about where the infield bases should be. Back in school, before camp, I was shorter and smaller than the rest of the kids. I was always the last to be picked for any team when we played. Then, a few months ago, it got even worse. The kids started to call me names and no one talked to me, even though I didn't do anything bad. At the same time, the radio kept talking about some place far away called Pearl Harbor. One day, Mom and Dad came to get me out of school. Mom cried a lot because we had to move out of our house real fast, throwing away a lot of our stuff. A bus took us to a place where we had to live in horse stalls. We stayed there for a while until we came here. This camp wasn't anything like home. It was so hot in the daytime and so cold at night. Dust storms came and got sand and everything, and no one could see a thing. We sometimes got caught outside, standing in line or to go to the bathroom. We had to use the bathroom with everybody else instead of like one at a time at home. We had to eat with everybody else too, but my big brother Teddy ate with his own friends. We lived with a lot of people in what were called barracks. The place was small and had no walls, and babies cried at night and kept us all up. Back at home, the older people were always busy working, but now all they did was stand or sit around. Once, Dad asked Teddy to get a cup of water. "Get it yourself," Teddy said. "What did you say?" Dad snapped back. The older men stood up and pointed at Teddy. "How dare you talk to your father like that?" one of them shouted. Teddy got up, kicked the crate he was sitting on, and walked away. I had never heard Teddy talk to Daddy that way before. That's when Dad knew we needed baseball. We got shovels and started digging up the sagebrush in the big empty space near our barracks. The man in the tower watched us the whole time. Pretty soon, other grown-ups and kids started to help. We didn't have anything we needed for baseball, but the grown-ups were pretty smart. They funneled water from an irrigation ditch to flood what would become our baseball field. The water packed down the dust and made it hard. There weren't any trees, but they found wood to build the bleachers. Bats, balls, and gloves arrived in cloth sacks from friends back at home. My mom and other moms took the covers off mattresses and used them to make uniforms. They almost looked like the real thing. I tried to play, but I wasn't that good. Dad said I just had to try harder. But I did know that playing baseball here was a little easier than back home. Most of the time, the kids were the same size as me. All the time I practiced, the man in the tower watched. He probably saw other kids giving me a bad time and thought I was no good. So I tried to be better because he was looking. Soon, there were baseball games all the time. Grown-ups played, and us kids did too. I played second base because my team said that was the easiest. Whenever I was at bat, the infield or the other team started joking around and moving in real close. The catcher behind me in the crowd for the other team would say, "Easy out." I usually grounded out. Sometimes I got a single. Then came our last game of the year to decide on the championship. It was the bottom of the 9th inning, and the other team was winning 3-2. One of our guys was on second, and there were 2 outs. 2 pitches, and I swung both times and missed. I could tell that our guy on second was begging me to at least get a base hit so somebody better could come up to bat. The crowd was getting loud. "You can do it! Strike out! Hitter! No hitter! No hitter!" I glanced at the guardhouse behind the left field foul line and saw the man in the tower leaning on the rail with the blinding sun glinting off his sunglasses. He was watching, always watching. Suddenly, it made me mad. I gripped the bat harder and took a couple of practice swings. I was going to hit the ball past the guardhouse, even if it killed me. Everyone got quiet, and the pitcher threw. I stepped into my swing, and I pulled the bat around hard. I'd never heard a crack like that before. The ball went even farther than I expected. Against the hot desert sun, I could see the ball high in the air as I ran to first base. The ball went over the head of the left fielder. I dashed around the bases, knowing for sure that I would get tagged out, but I didn't care, running as fast as I could to home plate. I didn't even realize I had crossed it. Before I knew it, I was up in the air on the shoulders of my teammates. I looked up at the tower and at the man. With a grin on his face, he gave me a thumbs-up sign. But it wasn't as if everything was fixed. Things were bad again when we got home from the camp after the war. Nobody talked to us on the streets, and nobody talked to me at school either. Most of my friends from camp didn't come back here. I had to eat lunch by myself. Then baseball season came. I was the smallest guy again, but playing baseball in camp had made me a lot better. The other guys saw that I was a pretty good player, and they started calling me Shorty, but they smiled when they said it. By the time the first game came around, I felt almost like a part of the team. Everyone was laughing and horsing around on the bus, but as soon as we got there, it hit me. Nobody on my team, or the other team, or even anyone in the crowd looked like me. When we walked out onto the field, my hands were shaking. It felt like all those mean eyes were staring at me, wanting me to make mistakes. I dropped the ball that was thrown to me, and I heard people in the crowd yelling, "Jap." Now, that's a word, it's called a racial slur. So it refers to the fact that this child is Japanese. So in this book, we're going to say it, but we would never, it's a rude thing to say to somebody, so we would never say it to another person. But because this book is a historical book and this kid is telling about an experience that he had, we will say it. I hadn't heard that word before I went to camp. It meant that they hated me. My team came to bat, and I was up next. I looked down. I thought maybe I should pretend to be sick so I wouldn't have to finish the game. But I knew that that would make things even worse because then I would get picked on at school and be called a chicken. And they would use that bad word, too. It was my turn at bat. The crowd was screaming, "The Jap's no good. Easy out." I heard laughing. I swung twice and missed. The crowd roared each time I missed, drowning out my teammates, who were saying, "Come on, Shorty, you can do it." I stepped back to catch my breath. When I stepped back up to the plate, I looked at the pitcher. The sun glinted off his glasses as he stood on the mound like the guard in the tower. We stared at each other. Then I blocked out the noise around me and got set. The pitcher wound up and threw. I swung and felt that solid whack again, and I could see that little ball in the air against the blue sky and the puffy white clouds. It looked like it was going over the fence. The end. So the second book is called The Book Itch, Freedom, Truth in Harlem's Greatest Bookstore. And it's by Vaunda Nelson. This house is packed with all the facts about all the blacks all over the world. That's what it says above our door. We own this place, this house, the National Memorial African Bookstore. It's our home just about because we spend so much time here. On the weekends in the summer, I ride my bike to the store and help Dad. I get to carry the signs out in the morning and put the flags of African countries in the holders near the curb. All kinds of people come to 2107 7th Avenue, kids and grown-ups, black folks and white folks, writers and politicians, artists and teachers. Even famous people, like actors and musicians from the Apollo Theater, visit the bookstore. Sometimes it's so busy you can hardly get inside. One day, a crowd bigger than usual is packed around the door. I squeeze through and pull up my bike. "This is my boy, Louis," Dad says. I look up. It's Muhammad Ali. He's so tall I have to lean my head all the way back to see his face. I feel his big boxer's finger close over mine. It's like shaking hands with a giant. I can't think of anything to say. Mr. Ali pushes my chin up. I guess my mouth was hanging wide open. He and Dad are laughing at me, but I don't care. I just met the heavyweight champion of the world. Dad opened his store in Harlem Square way before I was born. Mom says he started out with 5 books and a mission. She says he had something in his heart. He believed in so much that he'd do just about anything to make it happen. Dad says he got the book itch and needed to scratch it. Back then, he'd walk up 7th Avenue and onto 125th Street selling books out of a push cart. "Don't get took, read a book," he'd call. When Dad went to a bank to borrow money to open a bookstore for black people, the banker said no. He said Dad could have a loan to sell fish and chips or fried chicken, but not books. The banker told him black people don't read. My dad believed they would. He washed windows and saved his penny and opened the bookstore. And he was right. People came and they read. And now we have about a zillion books in the store, and more people come every day. They come and they talk and they read and they buy. Dad doesn't have to sell on the street now, but sometimes we do anyway. Dad says he wants to reach people who might not know about the store, people who don't know how important books are. We push the cart calling, "Knowledge is power, you need it every hour, read a book." Dad made that up just like he made up the sign over the store. He plays with words until they say what he feels. I guess that makes him a poet. Dad's name is the same as mine, Louis Michaux. But people call him Professor, even though he didn't go to school much. Dad says he doesn't have college knowledge. He educated himself by reading books and by living. He says, "You are not necessarily a fool because you didn't go to school." "Can I stay home and read books and learn by living?" I ask. "You're going to go to school," Dad says. There are things you can learn from your teachers, but you don't stop thinking for yourself, and you don't stop asking questions. Me and my dad talk about important things, like the truth and what it means to be free. Dad says books can help you. Not every book is true, he says, but the more you read, the easier it is for yourself to find out what is true. Dad lets people read books without buying them. There's a boy who will read in the store every Saturday like it's a library. Dad says books will help him clear the weeds and plant the seeds so he'll succeed. Like I said, Dad's a poet. Customers stay as long as they want, even if it's past closing time. Dad never makes them leave like other stores do. Sometimes Dad locks up so late he's too tired to come home. He sleeps there with all his books. I don't always understand his poetry, but I like the sound of Dad's words. He calls the bookstore the house of common sense and the home of proper propaganda. Mom says that means the bookstore is a place to find good information and ideas. People come for more than the books. They come to talk and to listen. When me and Dad set up the raised platform outside the store, people crowd around. They know there's going to be a rally. News spreads fast, and some people find out from flyers. Most folks hear through the grapevine. I like to stand on the platform and look out. People everywhere, and there are some squad cars there too. Dad jokes, anytime more than 3 black people congregate, the police get nervous. People come to hear talk about fighting for the same rights as white people. talk about jobs and voting, about how black folks should respect and support each other. People shout angry words. They kid around and they laugh. And sometimes I don't get why they're mad or what's so funny. Dad talks to the crowd from the platform too. He says black people need to learn their history by reading books. If you don't know and you ain't got no dough, then you can't go, and that's for show. The days Mr. Malcolm X speaks, lots of people come. When we first met, Mr. Malcolm shook my hand and gave me the kindest smile. He and Dad are friends. Mr. Malcolm even gets mail at the store. He loves books just as much as we do. He says he could spend the rest of his life reading just to satisfy his curiosity. When Mr. Malcolm comes to the store, he sits in the back and talks with Dad about what's going on before climbing onto the platform. The crowd claps and cheers so much, Mr. Malcolm has to wait a long time before it can get quiet and before he can say anything. And then when he does, they get riled up all over again. I remember one time he said, "Nobody can give you freedom. Nobody can give you equality or justice or anything. If you're a man, you take it." That really got them going. There were bodyguards watching out for Mr. Malcolm, and when I asked Dad why, he says, "Malcolm speaks the truth, and there are people who don't want us to hear it." One cold day, I'm down at Rockefeller Center ice skating with my friends. When Dad comes for me, he says, "Hurry now, I've got to get to the Audubon Ballroom. Malcolm is expecting me." I jump in the car, and Dad takes me home, and he speeds off to the ballroom. While I'm doing my homework, Mom gets a phone call. She covers her face and turns away. Mom hangs up and looks at me. "Malcolm, her eyes are wet, and she can't talk for a minute. Someone shot him while he stood to give his speech. I can't breathe." Mom opens her arms, and I run to her. "Don't worry," she says. "Your father is coming home." In, out, I am breathing again. Later, I hear Dad's key in the door. He hugs Mom and me and sags into his chair. He takes off his glasses and cleans them. At last, he says, "When I got to the ballroom, everybody was rushing out, screaming and hollering, and I went inside, and there he was, laying dead." Dad kind of shivers. I was supposed to be sitting right next to him. Well, I'm glad he wasn't. I'm sad they killed Mr. Malcolm, but I'm glad my dad is all right. I'm glad I went skating and Dad came to get me. I'm glad. After I go to bed, Dad sits in the living room crying in the dark. I'd never heard Dad cry before, and I don't know what to do. I can't keep from crying, too. In the morning, Dad comes into my room, and he looks tired but okay. He sits on the edge of my bed and pets my forehead. Malcolm used to say, "If you're not willing to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary," Dad said. They think they got rid of him, but people won't forget Louis. His words will never leave us. Words. That's why people need our bookstore. Maybe someday I'll believe in something so much I'll have the itch to make it happen. But for now, I read books, I ask questions, and I listen to people on the platform outside, and I talk with my dad about the truth, here at the National Memorial African Bookstore. Okay, thanks for joining us this week for some stories for some older kids, and next week we will also have some longer stories that would be more appropriate for older children. But like I said, you can always look at the back catalog on YouTube or on our Facebook page. Thanks, see you next week.